calling to order of the work session for Bella Vista POA. The first item on the agenda, since we have everybody here, is Tom, the waiver for the second set of tees, which came in over budget.
Hey, Mike. Reoccurring theme that we're seeing because of what's going on with the inflation is Keith had a project for tees and it came in. Our requirement on our policy is that any capital project that exceeds 10% requires a vote of the board to acknowledge that it came in over budget. Unfortunately, we've had a number of those already this year. We have this one this month, and we'll probably have another one next month. Pretty much every capital project has just been hit hard all year long. So we're asking for that. The project, which was originally budgeted at $30,000 for the Highlands Forward tees, it came in at $45,000. Do want to remind everybody this was a carryover project from last year, so that means that the original estimate of $30,000 was generated back in September of 2020. So it's an old estimate, and then on top of that you have inflation.
Tom, in our 23 budgets, have we put a 10 to 15% increase to many of these?
Yes, that's what we're doing. Good, absolutely. We went with 10%, but the estimates are going to be more current. But we're trying to protect ourselves so we won't be in the same situation. Mind if I keep on going? Okay, the next item is the license agreement for the West Side Fire Station. If you recall, if you were to go up to the, I think it's fire station number 3. It used to be number 3. They now built the city built a new one across the street, and for years the fire station, the old location, they'd been using POA land to access the rear portion of the building so they can pull in the fire trucks so they all face out forward. So they were using POA land to do that. There's a little driveway there. We have a water tower there, and it was just a handshake agreement. They're going to be changing that. I've been told it's going to be a sand storage for winter storms. They would like to continue to use that access point, but before they go through all the work, they would like to formalize it with a licensing agreement. So so the POA can't come back and say, no, get off our property. We wouldn't do that, but they just want to formalize it, and it's much better to have it formalized than a handshake agreement. So it makes total sense. The next item is on policy 1.01, which is member access to association information. The board voted on this last month. Just for those members that are viewing at home, the process on approving policy changes, what it normally happens is it starts with the Rules and Regulations Committee. They vote to move it up to the board. It's then discussed at the at the work session, and then voted upon in the regular session, which is what happened last month. And then the committee very briefly touched on, the Rules and Regulations Committee very briefly touched upon it at their meeting earlier this month. And then we're talking about it at a second work session, and then the board would potentially vote on it at next week's regular meeting. So actually, when you're looking at a policy change, it's actually going through 6 different meetings before it is finalized. So if viewers at home want to see all those, all those meetings are recorded, they're all available on our website. And so what ends up happening is as those meetings get towards the 5th and 6th, the board tends to not discuss the topic anymore because they've already hashed it out. So I wouldn't be surprised if next week it went through very quickly. But you can definitely go back to the original. So the September Rules and Regulations Committee, which is when they would have talked about it at greater length.
As soon as that's approved, the new policy's put up on.
Mike.
Sorry. As soon as it's approved, the new policy goes up on the website, correct?
Correct, But also, when the Rules and Regulations Committee recommends that it go forward, it's under, we have a section that says under consideration. It's on the website.
So then it's moved up and becomes part of,
So that becomes the official part. But we always make that available for our membership so they can view it and comment and so forth.
And what we're voting on at this upcoming, at the board meeting is, has no changes from what we approved the last one.
No, there's no changes at all. It's the exact same. Also, just kind of taking a step back, because we're going to talk about 4 additional policies. And all of those are, Doug and I have been going through, and we've been working with the Rules and Regulations Committee to really simplify the language. We're not, so far there haven't been any huge shifts in what we're trying to do. So it's just really trying to simplify the language and make sure it's consistent. We're moving on. So that policy 1.01, that's the second of 2 required votes. The next 4 would be the first vote of 2 required votes. That's policy 1.02, establishing, changing, or rescinding policies. Policy 1.03, guidelines for association committees. Policy 1.03.1, audit committee. Policy 1.03.2, guidelines for functions of elections committee. So we can go through each one of those and we can talk about the changes. It's really at the discretion of the board as to how detailed you want to talk. I can reference high level some of these changes, or what would you like me to do?
I would think that the board, and I'm speaking for myself here, would like to know what the changes are in the work session.
All right, let's go. Let's start with policy 1.02, which is establishing, rescinding. If you go down, you'll see under duties, number 2, you'll see that we struck that entire sentence out, that entire paragraph, and it was really redundant. It was talking about the committee has the authority to renumber and reorganize. But the paragraph before that says they can make any change they want. It says it better than that. So it's to call out, renumber, and reorganize. That really makes no sense at all. Under procedures, under 2A, it'll talk about if an emergency is approved once notice and vote is required with 2/3 vote of the board required. That's actually from the declaration, or is that the bylaws? That's it, the bylaws, okay. So that's just making the bylaws and the policies consistent. On policy 1.03.
I guess the only comment on 1.02 is I wonder if this was put in there, the striked out part, for clarification only. I wonder, do you think it's too wordy to up at the top paragraph say to include renumbering?
We could.
I don't know if that was just, if
to
there was
me,
a question at one time about, well, that's not the same number this year, or I don't know.
The paragraph ahead says, the committee recommend establishing, changing, and rescinding association governing documents. That's really,
It is.
that says everything. You don't need to.
It does. I
Why
just
they
wanted
would
to-
go into just this specific renumbering the policies.
Yeah, it's just for the clarification, so I didn't know if at a later date, we don't want somebody to say, well, hey, that was a different number. But if you guys think it's clear enough, I understand it's encompassing, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's clear enough as well, yeah.
Okay.
it makes sense to me, but November of '21, when was that number 2, the thing we're scratching, put in there anyway? The last couple of years, I mean, how long has
No,
it
that-
been there,
that's
It's been
100
there for a
years?
long time, yeah.
That goes
Yeah.
way back.
Yeah, it's been
Okay.
a long time.
All right.
And that's some of the effort. This goes back in conversation. Doug did a really comprehensive review of the policies back in 17. And at that time, we actually got rid of a few policies that absolutely made no sense at all. We think that some of those policies may have been created 10, 15, 20 years ago and they appeared to be a reaction to something that had occurred.
Exactly.
But we couldn't necessarily figure out what had occurred and why the policy was there. And so those types of things, when you pick out a sentence like that and go, well, why was it there in the first place? I don't know. 1.03, on that one, we still had the Community Involvement Committee in there, listed as one of our committees. So that committee went the wayside years ago. So just clearing up language. Also on the very bottom, you'll see committees may create subcommittees to assist in completing their assigned work. And then we deleted, and membership on these committees may be approved by the board. That was not required because a committee member has to be approved by the board in the first place, and subcommittees are made up of committee members that are already approved, so it was redundant. Is it okay if I move to the next one?
I
Audit.
guess just one other, I'm sorry, no, I think we did this before, but, so a committee cannot go outside of their committee to form a subcommittee?
No.
If that's the case,
No.
then yes, I agree.
The
it's
way, the
redundant.
way the policy is written and how it has been conducted is a committee, let's pick on the golf committee. Golf committee, they want to research an issue that's going to take too much time. And so what they'll do is they'll assign 3 members of the golf committee and go research this issue and bring your findings back to us at the next meeting. Golf hasn't necessarily done that. Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but Lakes has done it several times on some big issues they've wanted, and the committee member has gone out and they've done research and they come back and they do a report. So that's how it should work. Is the subcommittee kind of goes off, does their research, but they don't bring in additional help. If they do, it would be informal additional help, but really it's just the committee. So subcommittee is made up of committee members.
So more of, if anybody from the outside, it's more of a expert opinion or somebody that has information that the subcommittee needs.
Yeah, and they would just, the subcommittee would just work with that individual.
Yes.
But that individual would not be on the committee. And keep in mind that a subcommittee, since it's limited to 3, it really has no power or authority.
At all, yeah.
It's just an advisory, so.
Advisory is the
It's
word.
an advisory to an advisory committee. So it really has, but they do really good work.
Well, example of that would be, when was it, Tom? 4 years ago when we did the Brittany research?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
of the golf committee, 3 members of the golf committee went out and, to your point, talked to a couple people in the community and then came back and did the presentation. But all 3 were members of that committee.
And I think when I joined the rec committee, they had a team do an archery kind of evaluation of to where to
Right.
go and all that kind of stuff. But I agree that if the subcommittee is composed of committee members, I agree that's redundant.
Right. Audit committee,
Sorry.
1.03.1. So on this one, we did make some more material changes. It's listed that the term of a person on the audit committee is 3 years. Well, that really doesn't make any sense because the term of a board member is 3 years. Now, they can always rerun, run again, but the term is 3 years. So that means that a audit committee member, and the audit committee is made up of board members, is immediately upon being elected to the board would go on the audit committee. My opinion, the preferred is that members of the audit committee should be made up of board members that have been on the board for at least a year, maybe 2 years. And so if you were to add that 1 year, okay, so you get your sea legs underneath you, you get accustomed to being on the board, and now you're on the audit committee after you've been on the board for a year, but you have a 3-year term, but that would go into your fourth. It just doesn't make any sense. Also, with every other committee assignment, it's a one-year obligation. So when you're the liaison for the golf committee, the rec committee, the lakes committee, that's a one-year assignment. If you're on the rules and reg, that's a one-year assignment. So it just makes sense to have the audit committee be a one-year assignment. With that being said, on an informal basis, I do think the continuity of trying to get the same people on the audit committee is a good thing. I don't think you need to codify that. And we see that with the rules and regs. Jerry's been on the rules and regulations committee for 3 years.
Yep, about 3 years.
And so he has that continuity. That's another challenging committee assignment that takes some time, some seasoning. And so.
And I've been on there for 2 years.
Correct. The next one down is under duties, Roman numeral 2, number 2, periodically review the performance of the auditors, make recommendations to management and the board, prepare. So we just want to make sure that, every once in a while, the management team will go out and they'll do an RFP to consider switching audit firms. And then that recommendation from the management team comes to the audit committee. And then the audit committee needs to make a recommendation to the board, and then the board has to vote on it. So it's not a situation where management can make the decision on our own. We have to do the research, so forth.
Just so you're aware, this section is the new language that I put in resulting from comments at the GM meeting.
Thank you.
So I think Jan had suggested a change, and so this is language reflective of that change, that suggestion.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. And then the next one is 1.03.3, which is the elections committee.
What about 2?
Got two. Sorry. On this one, we shortened it, so under board votes, under 2, the committee will oversee the development of a timetable for the board, and it keeps on going and talks about how long that is, and it currently is 5 months, and we're recommending that we shorten it to 4 months. And the main reason for that is a lot of the language that was in this policy really dates back to before we started using an outside firm to tabulate. We started using the outside firm, the inspectors of election, back in 2016. Prior to that, we were having a committee manually count. This last vote, this assessment vote, we received 19,000 ballots. That would be really a huge undertaking for a group of volunteers to count 19,000 ballots, and having a third party that's arm's length really legitimizes the vote, and it's really hard to challenge the veracity of the vote, as opposed to a group that has a bunch of ballots and spreads it out on the table and starts counting 19,000. That's a really large task. So they had this long timeline in mind because everything took a lot longer. We just think we can shorten it up, so we're recommending 4 months. The comments that I said, is remember that a person will initially find out that they can apply to be on the board the 1st of December. But the election doesn't conclude till May, and the term doesn't start till June. So it's a really long process, and if we can shorten that up at all, it just makes sense. We also changed it under item number 4, where the committee will announce the candidates' names during the February regular meeting. It used to say January. They would announce the names in January, and then the next event that would occur would be March, which is the meet the candidate. So a whole 2 months later, you know, so it's just a long drawn out process. So if we can make it a little bit more efficient, it's hard to get people enthused for an extended period. So we're just recommending that we make that change. Under item 6, we added the committee has the authority to hire professional outside firms to administer the process, which we've been doing. The policy was silent to that. If you jump to the next page, you'll see all the way down at 13, the committee will ensure ballots submitted up to 30 minutes prior to the annual meeting are validated, counted, and added. So if you go back in time, all the way back to 16, we allowed people to walk in their ballot. If the meeting started at 6 o'clock, we allowed them to walk in their ballot all the way to 6 o'clock. So, well, then we have to get that information to the inspectors of election. They have to do their tabulations. They have to process the certification. Well, that takes like a half an hour. So if you recall back in 16, when we did when we had the assessment increase vote, the meeting was supposed to start at 6, but we didn't announce anything till about 6:30 because it takes that long. And so the people were very anxious. So we're just setting a reasonable expectation of, hey, we're going to cut it off 30 minutes beforehand. That will give us enough time to get the inspectors of election or whatever company that we're using to process it, get us the certification, and get everything installed so that we can start on time. All right? And we include that information on the ballot. It says very clearly if you're going to walk it in, you have to do it at least 30 minutes beforehand. And then on the last page of this, you'll notice, so this policy was originally talking only about the election of board members. It really did not reference the assessment vote. You had to go all the way back to the declaration to get guidance regarding the assessment vote. So we actually added this entire section just to really clarify on the assessment vote. And this is really just drawing from the declaration and making it easier to read. Because the declaration was written in 65 by an attorney that was not very friendly to the average reader. So this is just trying to make it a little bit more understandable for the average person to understand.
And you'll notice there, section 3 is a new section from our last, again, comments that were had at the GM meeting. So just reiterating that change was made for you all to review.
Any questions on that one? Okay, so the next thing, we just referenced the assessment vote. So the community has voted to approve the assessment increase, and 2 steps still remain. First, one of those steps is a formal notice must be mailed out, and that will be a postcard. That's what we did in 2020, and it's just a formal notice saying, hey, we just want to, remind everybody this was approved. We post all the information about the results of the assessment increase, but not everybody reads their, our website or social media or what have you. So we have to do a formal notice. That will go out in January. And also the board needs to vote to approve the increase. So we're asking the board vote for that increase. It will go into effect March 1st. It's just kind of really the last step of formalizing the change. The board voted to initiate a vote. They did that first, in the spring. The community voted in favor of it. This is now the board circling back and saying, okay, the community has approved this. We are now formalizing it, and it kicks in on March 1st of 23. The last item is a capital project that we're trying to get done before the end of the year. The old pro shop at the country club has been used for a while, but for office space. But really, we've kind of cobbled it together, and it's just really not meeting the needs. And this is for our database team, and our database team is you know, a real important part of the North Star update and integrating all of our information together. And so what we'd like to do is renovate this building to meet our needs. The other thing we have is we have a brown recluse infestation in that building, and we have sprayed and done everything we can, but we really need to pull all that insulation out of the attic and really renovate that area to get that stuff out of there. We have some employees that are a little nervous because they find them on their desks and so forth, and I would be too. And lastly, the restrooms in there, it's a pit. It needs to be renovated. It's just a pit. And that's where our golfers at the turn will go to the bathroom. So we need to renovate that bathroom. So we're asking for $26,009 and exactly 99 cents to renovate that. And this would be a 22 project, and our goal is to get it done before the end of the year. And it'll make a better work environment for our employees, safer work environment, and also it'll make for a better experience for our golfers when they are doing the turn and they need to use the restroom, because it's really, the bathrooms are to a point where they are cleaned daily, but when the stuff is that old, you can clean, and it just, when it's that old, it just looks dirty because the tile is dirty, the grout is dirty, it's just nasty.
I'd like to reiterate that this is not connected to the Bella Vista Country Club. It's a separate building up by the shed outside of it.
Yeah, it's the old pro shop that was in place for years and years, and you know, I think the one comparison that the one thing that I mentioned there is $26,000. That's a lot less than, you know. Fortunately, we have an empty building, and if we were to go out and have to rent space, it costs a lot more than $26,000. This will meet our needs.
And it's being done in-house, that's why we can do it so inexpensively.
Yes, not all of it, you know, the tile work and the carpeting work, we're gonna have a company do that, but all the other stuff is all in-house, so we're able to do it very affordably. That's all I had to cover.
All right, thank you, Tom. The next item on our agenda is the open forum for property owner comments. We didn't have anybody?
No emails,
Okay.
no.
No emails either. Okay,
There were no emails.
No emails.
From members.
yeah. Okay, that's, leads us to the end of the work session. Is there anything else that we need to focus on or talk about other than upcoming meetings? Okay, so the board regular session will be Thursday, October 27th at 6 p.m. Senior staff presentation, budget presentations for the board will be November 3rd at 9 o'clock to 3 p.m. in the boardroom. Lakes JAC meetings Wednesday, November 9th at 2 p.m. here in the boardroom. Golf JAC meetings will be November 9th at 4 p.m. here in the boardroom. And let's see, budget presentation to the community. It will be Thursday, November 10th at 6 p.m. at, in the boardroom here and via live stream. Recreational JAC meeting is Monday, November 14th at 4 p.m. here in the boardroom and also live stream. And Board of Directors regular session and Thursday will be November 17th at 6 p.m. Is there anything else? Okay, then we are adjourned.